Wang, farewell in the mountains. Our farewells in the mountains are over. With dusk coming on, I close my door. Spring grass is green year after year, but my friend I may see no more. So this is the third of Wang's 5-word quatrains in this section of the book. And this one is not, as far as I'm aware, in a part of the Wang River collection to which the first two belong to. And it seems to be, at least on the face of it, a pretty straightforward parting poem. I would say the two topics that are present in this poem are, on the one hand, the retired life. It seems to be spoken by a persona, by a poetic persona, who is clearly living the secluded life of the recluse in some unspecified mountains. And along with this secluded life topic, it also includes parting, separation from friends, and the concomitant reverberations of this topic, like the passing of time, old age, separations that might be permanent, etc. Now, we've already encountered a lot of poems like this. Many poems in which someone who's living in the mountains and another person, sometimes the person who composes the poem is the other person who has come to make a little trip to see the hermit. Well, we've seen these poems, and they're generally pretty similar, and they basically describe the moment of separation and the sadness felt at that moment and the uncertainty about the future. Sometimes, if they're wrong enough, they will also include some praise for the person who is living the retired life, and maybe a contrast between that person's life and the visitor's life, who is still trapped by the red dust of the world. In the case of this poem, it's written from the perspective of the person who stays behind, of the hermit, which, matches Wang Wei's general persona. So it's a pretty brief poem. I don't think it has too many references, at least not references that need a long explanation. So let's just go straight forward to commenting its two couplets. First couplet. Our farewells in the mountain are over. With dusk coming on, I close my door. So the first couplet locates us after the separation has taken place, and I think some commentators of this poem have emphasized this aspect, the fact that it doesn't dwell on exactly the moment of separation and the sadness that goes along with it, which is generally the moment that most of these separation poems tend to emphasize. We get a glimpse of the poetic persona after the event of parting, after the farewells have taken place. So the farewells are over, and dusk is coming on. Remember, so nightfall is coming. The poet closes his door, and we may imagine he goes inside his hut, and he's going to maybe have a dinner, maybe meditate, maybe go to sleep. But he is reflecting on the aftermath of the parting itself. So dusk is coming on. Remember that the background, whether it be seasonal or the daytime or whatever, is generally used. Nature is generally used as a resounding box for human feelings, and dusk is the moment of sadness in the day. It's the moment when the light fades away, and it can act as a sort of metaphor for old age and death. And probably there is something to it from what we will see in the second couplet. The translation that we use here, which is David Lunde's, presents a very simple imagery. Dusk coming on, I close my door in the second couplet. I've seen different translations, and others tend to translate the second line differently. Sorry. So the last two characters of the second line read something like firewood door. So the whole poem is probably dusk coming, the whole line, I think. I don't have it here, but character by character, it probably will be something like dusk, come, close, firewood, door. And so firewood door, in this translation, it's just meant probably to mean that, the poet is in a relatively humble or modest hut, and the door or to the hut is made with branches, the same type of branches that would be used for kindling a fire. Another interpretation, though, is that the sun is setting on the firewood. So we might imagine that next to the hut, there is a small pile of firewood for the autumn and the winter, or for cooking purposes, and the sun is setting on those twigs. They're becoming invisible, indistinct, in the running away light of the evening. Like Gongora would say, de dudosa luz del día. But anyway, I don't think that any interpretation changes the meaning substantially. We get this image of dusk, of prefiguring death, of dissolution of sight, and this dissolution of sight is equated with closing the door, with separating oneself from partners or a partner who have already gone away before this scene takes place, who have already left the mountains. Okay, let's continue with the second and last couplet. Remember, generally the third line is the pivotal one. It's the one that gives a change in tone or in Jueju, or it tries to expand what was said in the first couplet and give it some extra resonances or a new development. Spring grass is green year after year, but my friend I may see no more. So I don't think so. So the last couplet introduces the theme. You could say it's a new theme. The first couplet was parting in the mountains and the life in the mountains. The second one is a connected theme, especially connected to parting, which is the idea that partings might be permanent. China is very big. A scholar official had to roam over the country. Life expectancy and other factors related to it, led to high rates of mortality. So any separation could be a permanent separation. And any separation, even if not permanent, acts as a metaphor for the permanent separation that death will eventually bring. So this idea of the passage of time year after year, acting as a symbol for the possible death and permanent separation of friends. It's used in other poems for lovers as well. It's very typical in the poems of separation where a woman or a man is lamenting that his or her better half is far away. And especially in the woman persona, these poems, emphasize the passage of time equated with their aging, their becoming ugly, and the separation becoming permanent. So we get this image. In this case, it's contrastive. So nature here is not so much representing or the feelings or the reality of the poet. It's rather contrasting them. It's antithetical. Spring grass comes back again year after year with the same greenness. Humans do not. Humans age and die. We are not cyclical. We are linear, as opposed to the cyclical evolution of nature. So after the parting and the sad feelings that arise from partings, the poet, reflects and synthesizes these feelings in this couplet. The nature that surrounds me, the green grass, will flourish again in spring, but me and you, my friend, or friends, because, this is Chinese poetry, the parting could be from a friend or from different friends. Me and you, we will never meet again. Just to conclude, I think the word used for friend is pretty peculiar in this translation. I think it's Wang Sun from what I've seen in other translations, and this Wang Sun means something like the king's grandsons or the king's grandson, singular, plural, it could be any. So this seems to be a very polite and euphemistic way to referring to friends, like saying that they are of a good aristocratic breeding, they're descendants from the king or the emperor. So these good friends or good friend of a good upbringing are going away, and perhaps I will never see you again. So pretty short poem, and pretty traditional and conventional ideas and images, you could say. But okay, it does its part.